3. Pushing Jeezy. We coming in at the top of the game. We don't need nothing else but to make good music. Big Meech. Inside a windowless Atlanta warehouse, Meech is seated at the head of a marble slab table, watching the events unfold with untrusting eyes. A man in a white dress shirt, the only one in the room who's not wearing all black, starts his spiel. "Yo, Meech," he says excitedly, leaning into the table. "I got the deal of a lifetime." On the expanse of the table in front of the CEO, stacks of bills are piled to generous heights. To his left, his second-in-command, J-Bo, maintains a stony silence. Flanking them at the table are two more men. In the dark, cavernous background, two scantily clad women and a guy wearing a t-shirt that says, "Free Meech," barely make an impression against the shadows. Meech quickly puts an end to the negotiations. "Look here, man," he says in a low, raspy drawl. "A deal don't mean nothing to me, man." Meech turns to the guy to his right. "I'm not even supposed to be talking to this dude." Turns the other way to face J-Bo. Meech hollers, "Get Blue on the phone. Somebody get Blue on the phone, man." Blue Da Vinci, the rapper from Carson City and a close friend of Meech, answers the call. "What up, dude?" "Blue, man, this man is interfering with my business," Meech says. His agitation is starting to dissolve into hysteria. "You need to get down here and talk to this man. I don't know why somebody let him in the room to see what's going on anyway, man." "All right," Blue says. "Just let me run down here and check on that little shipment I was telling you about yesterday, and I'll get down there in a little while. Just give me a minute." Not long after, Blue, loaded with chains, his cornrows tucked behind his black bandana, swaggers into the room, singing, "'Cause I'm a boss when I'm running." By then, the man in the white shirt is gone. Blue glances up to greet Meech. "What up, man?" Meech is mumbling to no one in particular about the music, the money, the problem at hand. Motioning to Blue, he says, "You cannot be having that music dude coming up in here seeing all this money like this, man. You got to be able to separate the two. You can't do it. We cannot do it, man." What's going on in the room is not what it seems, or maybe it is. The two scenes, Meech calling Blue and Blue showing up at the warehouse, are bookends of a $500,000 video for Blue's 2004 single, "We Still Here." Directed by famed hip-hop videographer Benny Boom, bankrolled by Meech, and with guest appearances by Brooklyn rapper Fabulous, California's E40, and Blue's protege, an equal parts beautiful and frightening teenager called Ooh Wee. The video has all the cinematic appeal of well-done Hollywood. There's a story arc, sophisticated aerial camera work of downtown Atlanta, a choreographed dance scene, and Meech leaning comfortably against the steel-colored Rolls-Royce Phantom, taking in the dazzling production at hand. If it seemed ballsy for a major drug trafficker to finance a video in which he's cast as what appears to be a major drug trafficker, well, it was ballsy. It also wasn't the first time Meech commissioned art that perilously reflected life, and it wouldn't be the last. Somehow he felt safe presenting himself as a drug lord. He was flaunting it, sure, but flaunting it alone was not a crime. In fact, in this instance, flaunting it was a strategy. Meech sensed that in order to continue making money, he'd have to come up with a legitimate explanation for where his money was coming from. One way to rake in that kind of cash was through the music business. To Meech, the move was a natural progression, a way to transition from one kind of a hustle to another. More than that, it fulfilled a passion. What better way to legitimize your wealth than by doing something you love, and something your father always wanted to do but couldn't? To Meech, the key to liberating his family, both his criminal and blood-related one, was to launch a successful hip-hop label. As early as 2003, Meech began to direct his resources toward rappers he believed stood a chance of stardom. If they succeeded, they would sell enough albums to elevate Meech's name from street lore to national renown. In turn, the artists would need him as much as he needed them. That's because Meech could create for them the illusion of wealth, a prerequisite for hip-hop fame. If he could deliver the symbols of success, the cars, the jewels, the videos, and so forth, that would boost their notoriety. And if they were to hit it big, so would his newly incorporated record label, BMF Entertainment. It would be the ultimate return on his investment, but only if the feds didn't catch him first. Meech was so confident about his plan that even before his label landed a hit, let alone released a full-length album, he publicly spelled out his intentions. By doing so, he hoped to get noticed in an industry where there's no such thing as too much excess. Yet to some, both inside and outside the business, his words were offensive, in part for the assumption that he could buy success. "We coming in at the top of the game," Meech boasted in a 2004 DVD that chronicled the making of Blue Da Vinci's album. "We got all the cars we want, all the houses we want, all the clothes we want, all the jewelry we want, and all the hoes we want. We don't need nothing else but to make good music, that's it, and bring everybody else in with it and create jobs. We can do all kinds of things if we start from Blue Da Vinci." Meech anticipated that Blue's track, "We Still Here," would be the breakout hit for BMF Entertainment, and he spared no expense when the time came to produce and promote Blue. As the label's CEO and sole financier, Meech would throw as much support as he wanted to at Blue, his lone artist. "We Still Here" was recorded along with a handful of other tracks at Atlanta's Patchwork Studio, whose vocal booths have been graced by Whitney Houston, Cher, Britney Spears, and Snoop Dogg. But according to Patchwork Chief Operating Officer Kurt Daniels, Blue booked more time at the studio than any other artist. In addition to the pricey studio time and glitzy video, Meech lavished other luxuries on Blue: fancy cars, diamond-studded chains, and parties, parties, parties. The label hosted a listening party for "We Still Here" at Patchwork, attended by such guests as Goody Mob frontman Big Gip. Then there was the after party at the Westin in Buckhead, followed by the after party at a warehouse space downtown. When it came time to perform, be it for an audience or in front of a camera, Blue easily fell into the role of the rap superstar he wasn't. In one documentary-style video, he brandished a .357 Magnum that he casually claimed could blow you back about 4 feet. On another occasion, he talked about getting in shape so that he could fire an AK-47 with one hand. On film, he often spoke of himself in the third person, waxing philosophical about who was Blue Da Vinci. Basically, he ate it up. He was a goofy showman, one who overacted the part of the sinister gangster with a lighthearted side. While performing live, it was the same drill. Blue hammed it up for the camera, and the rest of the BMF crew quickly fell into place. As hundreds of guests thronged the stage at Blue's after party, he spat his lyrics into the mic while swaying in a mass of VIPs, including BMF honchos J-Bo and Fleming Ill Daniels, rappers Ooh Wee and Young Jeezy, and at Jeezy's side, an upper-level BMF distributor named Omari O-Dog McCree. The only one missing was Meech. He was still under house arrest for the Chaos killings, as evidenced by the Free Meech shirts that J-Bo and Ill wore on stage. But the boss did make a cameo of sorts, with the help of a film crew that visited an Atlanta high-rise where he was holed up. He was dressed in all white t-shirt topped by a baggy white tracksuit. He was sporting a huge diamond cross. And because the film was shot in grainy black and white, with the camera work slightly out of focus, the result was a vision of Meech as an ethereal, thuggish angel. "Even though I'm not there," he told the camera, as if speaking from the grave, "I'm not the focus. Blue Da Vinci is the focus. That's what y'all here for tonight. I wish I could be there tonight. God knows I wish I could be there tonight, but one day soon I'll be there with God's blessing." And so Blue became the center of attention. The attention of the film crews paid by Meech to follow him, of the club-goers who aspired to BMF's style of partying, and most important, of the CEO himself. As Meech said from his exile, "All our independent focus is on what Blue Da Vinci gonna do, and how he's gonna make it. If he take off, then we take off. If he don't take off, then we don't want to take off. Simple." Meech's explanation as to why he put everything behind Blue doubled as a wider, inspirational message to anyone who might be listening. Meech didn't intend merely to lift BMF Entertainment up to the level of Universal or Interscope or DreamWorks or Def Jam. He wanted Blue's ascent to serve as a ghetto Cinderella story. "We want Blue in the best of everything," Meech told the camera. "Show him the best of everything. Show him that a person can come from nothing to something and step in the game and keep going. He have everything he could want right now, and he's still trying to do something to bring other people up with him." Problem was that in the summer of 2004, it wasn't Blue who was taking off. All the sparkly bling and fancy cars and state-of-the-art studios in the world couldn't compensate for the one thing Blue Da Vinci lacked: raw talent. Blue's rhymes were straight gangster rap, and he delivered them with an appropriate dose of animosity. "You can't catch me on no corner pushing nickels and dimes," / "I got the bricks flying right out of Buckhead." But despite his air of credibility, Blue was not coming up with the kind of lyrics that would raise the genre to art, let alone generate any serious radio play. It was as if Blue were the caricature of another rapper who actually did possess that rare combination of gritty authenticity and transcendent poetry. That rapper was Jeezy. Young Jeezy Jenkins grew up on the outskirts of the history-rich have and have-not middle Georgia city of Macomb. Rooted in the rock and roll and R&B sensibilities of the Allman Brothers Band, Otis Redding, and Lil Richard, Macomb had grown into a hip-hop hub, a farm team to Atlanta's booming rap industry. Like Atlanta, Macomb had a strong mixtape culture and some heavyweight hip-hop clubs, allowing young rappers to find fame on the streets before approaching the big leagues. Jeezy, who was known as Lil J when he first started rapping, quickly established himself in those venues. In his early 20s, he relocated 75 miles north to Atlanta, where he fell in with the crowd that hung out along Boulevard. He befriended one of the resident drug dealers, O-Dog, and both the dealer and his hood proved fertile material for the rapper. Jeezy gives shout-outs to O-Dog in several tracks, including his early hit Air Forces, and the neighborhood serves as a backdrop for a number of other songs. The streets around Boulevard, characterized by brick low-rises, sequestered by iron gates and crowds of boys squatting on the lawless corners, were as real to Jeezy as any he'd known in Macomb, and he'd known a few. Meech, who was O-Dog's boss, grew well acquainted with Jeezy, though perhaps a tad too late. Meech was generous with the rapper, paying Atlanta club DJs to play his yet unheard tracks and lending him cars and jewelry for various video shoots. But Jeezy did not join BMF Entertainment's roster. By the time the label was incorporated in early 2004, Jeezy, who was 26 at the time, was running his own company, Corporate Thugs Entertainment, which sold tens of thousands of his mixtapes. He'd also hooked up with Atlanta mixtape gurus DJ Drama and DJ Cannon, who ran the production team Gangsta Grills, and would soon release Jeezy's wildly popular street album, Trap or Die, trap being the synonym for the drug game. Jeezy also had buy-in from two major labels. Jeezy, along with 3 other rappers, was part of the collective Boys in the Hood, which had inked a deal with P. Diddy's Bad Boy Entertainment. And as a solo artist, Jeezy had just signed with Def Jam. As far as Meech and the rest of BMF was concerned, Jeezy was one of them. Jeezy wasn't resisting. Outside the Westin on the night of Blue's listening party, Jeezy draped an arm around Blue and declared, "This is my motherfucking homeboy, Blue Da Vinci. It's love, man. It's family, dog." Meech placed his bets on Blue because he had to, but it was Jeezy who supplied the soundtrack for BMF's ascent. When Meech and his crew rolled around Atlanta in their Bentleys and Lambos and Ferraris and Maybachs, Jeezy's tracks were pumping through their speakers. That was back when few outsiders would have recognized the rapper's shrewd and disillusioned rasp. But soon, a full year before his major label debut in the summer of 2005, Jeezy's verse began floating from the rolled-down windows of other, more modest rides. Not just in Atlanta, but in Miami, New York, and LA, too. His sound, a heady mix of dark cinema, guttural grunts, and world-weary observations, was catching on. Jeezy was making it. And Meech and J-Bo and Ill and Blue and O-Dog were along for the ride. All 5 of them appear as characters in the video for Jeezy's first major label single, Over Here, filmed in Miami at the South Beach Mega Strip Club Teasers. In one scene, Meech let a handful of bills cascade over the cleavage of a beautiful dancer. In another, dozens of models lounge around a rooftop pool where it's raining money, and several onlookers wear T-shirts printed with the title of Blue's single, We Still Here. The video for We Still Here, incidentally, was more polished than Jeezy's. Camera work was more sophisticated, the choreography more professional, but there were also telling similarities. Both videos make abrupt transitions from colorful scenery and an upbeat tempo to a darker, slower vibe. And after the transition, both videos cut to shots of a silver Bentley and silver Rolls Royce, with Meech hovering in the background. BMF's influence extended beyond Jeezy's video and into the clubs where he performed. The act of making it rain cash, a practice that BMF claims to have originated, helped build crowds into a frenzy during Jeezy shows. Sometimes those performances would take place at the strip clubs BMF frequented, and the raining bills would have the added effect of energizing a mass of naked, clamoring girls. And as with Blue, Meech, and his crew, often would stake out a place of authority. They would position themselves on stage alongside Jeezy. Meech occupied a spot in the middle, either next to or just behind the rapper, and J-Bo, Ill, O-Dog, and Blue formed the periphery. O-Dog would receive a special nod from those on stage when his name cropped up in one verse or another. Dressing in matching black, often reeling from the euphoric high of top-notch ecstasy, Meech and his crew basked in the glow of their mini-kingdom. They were brothers in wealth, prosperity, and power, and they held court over one of the hottest scenes in hip-hop. Joining the hundreds of people spread before them in the audience, they chanted Jeezy's lyrics in unison with the rising star. 2 record deals, the radio still won't play me, but I don't give a fuck cause it's the streets that made me. Though Jeezy's all but certain success would do nothing to legitimize BMF Entertainment, it was no small consolation that the rapper, by mere association with Meech, was raising BMF's profile. But there was something else about Jeezy, something more intangible that made him invaluable to Meech. Jeezy delivered a high that no amount of pure cocaine could match. Looking back at his decade-long run as a drug kingpin, Meech says that nothing, not the money, not the respect, not the notoriety, was more exhilarating than one thing: pushing Jeezy. Within weeks of the parties that Meech threw for Blue, but couldn't attend, the boss was back on the scene. 6 months had passed since he was charged with the murders of Wolf and Riz, and the conditions of his bond, both the house arrest and the ankle monitor, were finally lifted. There was little for which authorities could continue to hold him. The evidence was slim, and indictment non-existent. One of Meech's first orders of business, as an unfettered man, was to celebrate his 36th birthday. It was not an intimate affair. In June of 2004, he rented an entire mega-club compound on Atlanta's industrial west side. The 25,000-square-foot space included 2 ultra-modern buildings, one with a dance floor ringed by plasma TVs, the other featuring a VIP loft with an elevated bed and movie projector. The club's sprawling courtyard, which could accommodate nearly 1,000 people on its own, was anchored by a 40-foot reflecting pool and Zen rock garden. Compound was the epitome of posh, Atlanta's destination for celebrity birthdays and parties thrown by the likes of Porsche and GQ. But Meech's birthday party blew those others away. The courtyard was adorned with 6-foot-tall white neon letters that spelled Meech. BMF Entertainment's insignia was carved in a massive block of ice. Half-naked models wore painted-on bikini tops and might have been the focal point if not for the $100,000 in rented wildlife. The party's theme, according to printed invitation, was Meech of the Jungle. The club's patio was graced by an elephant, an ostrich, a few zebras, and a pair of lions. Revelers gawked as the big cats paced restlessly in their cages. Meech was making up for lost time, and he was promoting his label hard. In his brother's eyes, however, a lifestyle like that was sure to attract the attention of the feds, and he was right. In a van parked outside compound, 2 men kept as close a watch on the party as they dared. One of them, DEA agent Harvey, knew more about BMF than any law enforcement officer in Atlanta. The other, the Atlanta Police Department's Detective Burns, was doing his best to catch up with Harvey's knowledge of the crew. Had Meech been aware of his uninvited guests, his likely response would have been, "Bring it on." Meech felt safe from harm, protected by a crew that he believed would never turn on him, and insulated by a business acumen that hadn't failed him yet. He figured he discovered the recipe for invincibility. Don't keep the company of snitches, don't sell to the feds, don't talk on the phone, and don't put anything in your name. Simple. But to Terry, it wasn't so straightforward as that. Terry's crew was separate and distinct from Meech's, and by the time Meech's birthday rolled around, neither boss had much of a say in what the other did. It wasn't as if Terry could come in and squash the partying and the flaunting and the lifestyle geared toward grabbing attention. The people doing the partying were answering only to Meech, and Meech was encouraging the debauchery. All Terry could do was sit back and hope that the partying didn't spiral too far out of control. In the meantime, he kept the reins tight on his own crew. While Meech was planning his birthday blowout, Terry was busy handing out orders to his trusty managers, distributors, and drivers. Unlike Meech, Terry did issue orders over the phone, but he tried to keep the language vague. Speaking to one driver in June of 2004, Terry said to go ahead and deliver the pants, cocaine. Later, the driver asked whether he was supposed to hand over a dime, 10 kilos, to which Terry answered yes. As for the destination, Terry said not to take the pants to A World, Atlanta, but to go there and pick up some mail, drug money. Of course, the team of federal agents cycling through the calls could clearly see that something was up, and as a result, Terry was drawing at least as much unwanted attention to BMF as Meech was. The growing divide between the brothers meant that Meech had to start operating on his own turf. Meech needed a network that, aside from the Connect, was independent of Terry's. The brothers already had their own crews. With the exception of Doc Marshall, who crunched BMF's numbers for both brothers, Terry and Meech did not share employees. What Meech really needed were some properties of his own to serve as stash houses. He quickly amassed 3 in Atlanta. One was a handsome, traditional home that sat far off the road on a wooded lot. The house was in a residential part of one of Atlanta's wealthiest neighborhoods, Buckhead, and it was called The Gate, after the iron security gate that Meech had installed at the foot of the driveway. BMF associates from out of town often stayed there, but the real purpose of the house was to have a place to receive cocaine shipments from California. High-ranking managers, including J-Bo, broke down the arriving shipments into smaller loads and handed them over to the distributors. Meech seldom, if ever, showed his face at the gate. 2 other houses also served as temporary shelter for the big shipments, and a few distributors were allowed there. In fact, only the most trusted insiders could visit those locations. One was a brick home in a sterile Atlanta subdivision. It was dubbed the Horse Ranch. The other, a classy townhouse, was called the Elevator because there was a small glass elevator in the home. Once the brothers fell out and Terry assumed control of the White House, Meech and J-Bo took up a permanent residence at the Elevator. Unlike the White House, investigators were completely in the dark about the elevator's whereabouts. But while Meech's living arrangement was shrouded in secrecy, his dominance in Atlanta was no mystery. Local cops and federal agents couldn't help but speculate about what Meech was thinking, but one thing was clear. He was advertising his presence in a way that got everyone talking. At several Atlanta intersections, including ones at I-75 and Peachtree Road, Meech announced his intentions from the sky. The testament of his power was printed in white block letters on a black 20 by 60-foot expanse. The words were a nod to Scarface, a frequent source of Meech's inspiration. In the film, Cuban-born drug lord Tony Montana looks to the Miami sky and sees a message ticking across the side of a blimp. The world is yours. Likewise, the billboards that Meech placed around the town declared, the world is BMF's. Of all the rumors being tossed around about Meech and BMF, it was the news of the billboards that really got Fulton County Assistant District Attorney Rand Shahey worked up. By mid-2004, Shahey was used to cops coming to him with increasingly outlandish stories about the Black Mafia family. But a drug dealer advertising on a billboard? Shahey had been with the DA's office for 2 years, and he loved the work. As part of the office narcotics division, he didn't have to deal with the heartache of violent crime. Victims weren't his thing, or the monotony of theft investigations. Not enough drama. Best of all, he got to work with a group of men he viewed as peers and equals. Shahey had close ties to the detectives who brought him the drug cases. Some say too close. He knew that several of his coworkers frowned on his cozy relationship with the police. And as with all the other things about Shahey that caused a stir at the DA's office, he didn't care. From the hoops in his ears to his tattooed triceps, his heavy silver rings to his tattered jeans, Shahey looked more like a narc than a prosecutor. He possessed an undeniable excitability, an intensity betrayed by wide eyes that flashed an almost too brilliant blue. Shahey was passionate, and if that sometimes got him into trouble, so be it. He often caught flack for speaking too much of his mind to his boss, District Attorney Paul Howard. Then there was his chumminess with the cops, an affinity that dated back to his days at a suburban DA's office. After moving from a small suburban office to the big city one, he found himself gravitating towards Atlanta's narcotics investigators. He rode with them when they executed search warrants. He participated in their stings. He carried a gun. And after wrapping up a day's work, he and some of the detectives would go out drinking, a ritualistic occurrence in the summer of 2004 when Shea's second marriage in 3 years was falling apart. Shea made himself available to the police when they needed legal advice, and they, in turn, filled him in on the talk of the streets. At the time, there was a lot of talk about the Black Mafia family, but not a whole lot of legal advice to hand out. That's because the DA's office had not landed a single indictment against the crew, in a town where hundreds of BMF's associates were believed to be controlling the drug trade. When one cop came to Shea with the startling revelation that the crew was advertising on billboards around town, the prosecutor was incredulous. He went to Buckhead to check it out, and he realized that, as with so many other rumors, the billboard wasn't what the people were making it out to be. The billboard was advertising a record label, in much the same way that Atlanta's iconic neon yellow So-So Def billboard graced I-75 on the south side of town. What are we going to do? Shea mused to himself. Take down So-So Def while we're at it? And so while the myth of the BMF crime syndicate was everywhere, the evidence to prove its existence was nil. In fact, there was only one person on the Atlanta police force with any institutional knowledge of BMF. He also happened to be Shea's best friend. Detective Burns had learned about the Black Mafia family on a fluke. In 2001, after he was promoted from a patrol officer in the city's most dangerous police zone to an investigator in the department's elite organized crime unit, he was trying to squeeze information out of a suspect. The guy didn't have insight Burns was looking for. Instead, he wrote down a name on a piece of paper and slipped it to the detective. The name meant nothing to Burns at the time. A year later, however, the name came up when Burns went undercover in a white-collar crime ring. An Atlanta company called Exquisite Empire was using the identities of innocent men and women to buy cars and homes for drug dealers. One of Exquisite's employees was the same man whose name was printed on that slip of paper, and Burns soon began to suspect that Exquisite's president, William Doc Marshall, played a significant role in a drug crew that called itself BMF. Burns's impeccable work in the Exquisite investigation helped qualify him for his next career move, inclusion in a multi-agency federal task force that was committed to rooting out drug kingpins. DEA agent Harvey helped out with the task force as well, and Shea, who like Harvey was not an official member, served as its liaison to the DA's office. Shea would assist in obtaining search warrants and, hopefully, drafting affidavits seeking wiretaps on BMF associates' phones. All three men, as well as a dozen others, were called together in the summer of 2004 to go over one of the task force's primary initiatives: target the highly secretive, seemingly impenetrable Black Mafia family. To some in the room, the letters BMF meant nothing, and the term Black Mafia family seemed almost comical in what it implied. But to Harvey and Burns, who were well ahead of the curve, and Shea, who was catching up, the difficulty of the mission was obvious. The meeting made clear the need to nab a BMF associate on drug charges, most likely an associate on the organization's lowest rungs, and persuade him to talk. The information would have to be good enough to set up an undercover buy and, from there, build a case for a wiretap. For that to happen, someone inside BMF would have to get sloppy. Until then, the task force agents would watch the streets as closely as they could, hoping they might catch a break.